Let's continue discussing the relationship between language curriculum design and language teaching, how the aspects of language curriculum design could be applied individually to the language teaching contexts in diverse situations. So in this regard, we're going to see now content and sequencing. In other words, how the notions of content and sequencing could be applied to language teaching, right? Before I start, I would just like you to pause the video for a while and think about some of these questions. Well, what do you understand by the terms content and sequencing? How would you choose reading content and sequence it for your own learners? What principles you need to imply while making decisions about content and sequencing? You could pause the video and think what you understand by these questions, and then relate the discussion later on to your own ideas, right? As we have already seen this topic in greater length in some of the previous modules during the course, that content and sequencing has its strong relevance to language teaching, because it gives, it sheds light on what to be taught in the classroom and in what order. In other words, if you want to choose content for us, for our reading class, how would you decide to choose that content? How would you sequence that content? In which order? Whether you're going to start with the topic, whether you're going to, for example, start with, whether you're going to choose content based on themes or topics. Okay, so what techniques you will employ to teach that content and in which order? So that's important to examine, to ensure that we know about content and sequencing. So it has got its usefulness for language teaching because it allows teachers to make, ready-made decisions about content and sequencing and its sequence, its order. The most important question in relation to content and sequencing is because it will, since it allows us to choose relevant content appropriate to the needs of the student. So, for example, will this activity will work for tomorrow's, will this, in other words, will this reading passage will help, develop students' skills of skimming and scanning, and will they continue to benefit from this exercise? So this is how the decisions about content and sequencing are considered very important in terms of implementing the document in reality in the classroom, right? Well, you might be wondering, and most of you might have already experienced these questions, and you might be experiencing when you're gonna take up your job as language teachers. So what reading passage will I use? What vocabulary will I get learners to focus on? How can I repeat items used in the previous lessons? What topics should I get my learners to talk about in the discussion activities? So in brief, content and sequencing is considered one of the important elements of language curriculum design overall. But now we have seen its significance at a smaller scale at the language teaching level, how individually we as language teachers can benefit from this notion of, choosing content and making key decisions, how to sequence it, how to order it.